Good morning. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. In today's update, multiple people are trapped after a pileup involving more than 50 cars in Fort Worth, Texas. 20 to 30 people are said to be in critical condition, but so far no deaths have been reported. Officials say the number of patients is, quote, growing by the minute. The crash has been declared a mass casualty event. No word yet on what caused it. The CDC is issuing a new quarantine rule for people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. At least 2 weeks after receiving their final dose and within 3 months of receiving that dose, people who have been vaccinated no longer have to quarantine if exposed to COVID-19 if they have no symptoms. More than 33 million Americans have gotten at least one dose of the vaccine. Meanwhile, highly contagious variants are spreading around the country. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom announced the state's first 2 cases of the highly contagious South African variant, in addition to 159 cases of the variant from the UK. The CDC now says a tight-fitting mask or double masking with a cloth mask over a surgical mask could reduce the risk of transmission by more than 95%. Day 3 of the impeachment trial against former President Donald Trump is set to begin in just an hour. House impeachment managers will continue laying the case for why they believe Trump incited the insurrection at the Capitol last month. Senators watched in silence yesterday as the prosecution played never-before-seen security footage from the day, including this moment when Officer Eugene Goodman led Senator Mitt Romney away from an approaching mob. Officer Goodman was on duty again yesterday, right outside the Senate chamber. So what can we expect from the trial today? ABC News Washington reporter Faith Abube and Leah Wright-Rigueur, ABC News contributor and associate professor of history at Brandeis University, are here to break it down for us. Ladies, good morning. Faith, I'll start with you. Democrats presented a lot of new video evidence yesterday. What are they planning today?
Well, Diane, after that gut-wrenching presentation yesterday, that emotional, terrifying replaying of what happened here on Capitol Hill on January 6th, lawmakers, House impeachment managers today will focus solely on tying the bow, basically bringing everything back together as they wrap up their case. And that case will be that former President Donald Trump is singularly responsible for the violence that we saw here on January 6th. So in order to make that case, today they'll be focusing on the lack of remorse and inaction of former President Donald Trump during the insurrection. And we sort of saw a preview of that yesterday. For example, during the presentation where they played video of the former Vice President Mike Pence being rushed to safety, they also showed video of Trump supporters reading his tweet in real time. 2 minutes before Vice President Mike Pence was rushed to safety, the former president tweeted that Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done. And on a bullhorn here on the Capitol grounds, his supporters, Trump supporters, were reading that tweet. And then we saw video of them chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." So the Democrats today will try to say that the former president knew that the former vice president was in danger and did absolutely nothing to help the case. Instead, he reveled in what was happening, and they're going to try to connect the dots in that situation. They'll also bring up the legal issues that are at play in this impeachment trial. So all of that, they said, will include some new evidence. They are not elaborating on what that new evidence is, but we expect to see more videos today as they make their case and wrap up their opening arguments.
And Faith, what do we know about the Republican reaction to the evidence presented so far? Could this change the minds of any senators who were inclined to acquit going into this?
Well, Democrats certainly hope that they can still change the minds of some Republicans here after this trial is over, before that vote. But we're really not seeing much of any movement here. They're saying that they are seeing it. They're convinced that it is there. We saw yesterday that Senator Mitt Romney, for example, came out of that presentation saying that it brought tears to his eyes. He was disturbed by it. Lisa Murkowski saying that she was angry. She was also disturbed, and that she said that the evidence was damning what she had seen. We saw Chuck Grassley saying that he was oblivious to how bad things really were on January 6th. So it was very emotional. We saw visible reaction from these senators on both sides of the aisle. Republicans also reacting as well, saying that what happened here shouldn't have happened. But the problem is a lot of them don't think that the Democrats are really connecting the dots and connecting it to what President Trump, former President Trump, actually did. So they believe what the rioters did was separate. It was bad. It should be condemned. They should be held accountable. But former President Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. Of course, the Democrats need at least 17 Republican senators to vote with them to convict former President Donald Trump. And at this point, we're seeing that is highly unlikely.
And Leah, you say the video reminded everyone of how close this came to being a political massacre. Can you unpack that a little bit and why you think that's so important?
Well, I think one of the things that we saw both in the video that was already released that the majority of the country has seen, but also in the newly released videos, is that these rioters were right there. They were right in the kind of Capitol Rotunda, but also within space, sometimes even feet within where these senators were, where these politicians were, and that they were close. But by the grace of a couple of key figures, by the grace of a door, of a window, that in fact they were able to escape harm. And so a lot of the ways that we think about this are simply, well, it didn't happen. But instead, what those videos showed us is that we came within moments, within seconds, within a critical decision of actually seeing something horrific happen in the space of the Capitol, and something horrific that was directed against politicians. So this wasn't a game. This wasn't, hyperbole. This isn't just people talking. And I don't think that we should downplay it. And what we're seeing with, I think, House managers in this case is that they are presenting a case for why this should be taken seriously, why this should be taken aggressively, and why, in fact, if not for a few choice decisions, this would have led to political violence and bloodshed.
And why do you think that's so important to I know it's not a legal case, but for the intents and purposes, for the legal arguments that they're trying to make in pointing the finger at the president?
Well, I think one of the things that they're trying to do is remind the senators that this wasn't just simply, protesting gone wrong, that this was a violent attempt to overthrow the government of the United States, to overthrow sitting politicians, Republicans and Democrats. And so for many of them, I think many of the people watching this footage, Republicans, Democrats, they were deeply affected by the footage that they saw. That image of the police officer who is being crushed and who is screaming out and crying. And we see, this really intense, violent moment. We know that it directly affected these senators who were not just there in the moment, but later watching it. So that's a powerful thing. But so, too, is the powerful image of seeing, the protesters and the rioters and the insurrectionists reading Donald Trump's tweets and using them as directives, listening to his speech and using them as directives. So that's how they're trying to tie these things together in order to say it's not simply random, spontaneous violence, but instead it is violence at the direction of the sitting president of the United States.
So, Leah, what do you expect to hear from the defense to try to counter all of this?
Well, I think the defense made it clear that they are not going to argue, the merits of the actual case, that they are interested in two things. One, saying that this is unconstitutional, that as a former president, that the president, that President Trump shouldn't actually be in this scenario altogether, that impeachment isn't a thing, shouldn't be a thing. But also, too, I think what we're going to see is that they're going to make the argument that, hey, yes, the president said really bad things. Yes, he incited a group of supporters, but that he can't be held responsible for the actions of the mob, of the crowd, that he was simply just engaging them in typical Trump fashion, where I think this falls flat. And I actually don't think that necessarily the defense argument matters that much, because a lot of these people have predetermined, a lot of the jurors in this case, the senators, have already made up their mind about the ways in which they're going to vote. But I think one of the things that the defense doesn't really necessarily care that much about is making a coherent argument. That in fact, this is about simply running out the clock and saying, look, this is over, this is done, and let's move on.
All right, Leah Wright-Rigueur and Faith Abube, thank you. And you can watch the impeachment coverage trial, the coverage of the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, beginning around noon Eastern, right here on ABC News Live. And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.